Chase Chin's expression was odd, alternating between sighs and smiles, puzzling the police officer beside him. "Hey, Big June," Chase Chin said after getting into the car, having remembered both their names. "Where are you taking me?" "This isn't the way to the Public Security Bureau, and it's not the direction to the city either." "Cut the chatter. Keep quiet." The two officers, preoccupied with their own thoughts, had no desire to engage in conversation. But Chase Chin continued, "I know you're in trouble because of Zhang Hongba's death, but considering you've been out there every day, enduring hardships, I turned myself in willingly. It's like I've handed you a merit." The officer beside him snorted coldly through his nose and elbowed Chase Chin in the stomach. "Shut up." Chase Chin screamed in pain, breaking out in a cold sweat. "Your leader would scold you if he knew you hit me." I feel dizzy. I need my medicine, medicine, medicine." The police officer turned his head away, ignoring him. But soon after, Chase Chin started vomiting, saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. Initially, the officer thought he was faking illness, but as the situation seemed serious, he urgently asked Big June to stop the car, saying, Look at him." Big June, also panicking, turned to look at Chase Chin, suspecting he couldn't be pretending, trying to escape, could he? Chase Chin, mustering his strength, said, "If I wanted to escape, why would I let you catch me? The medicine, in my right pocket." Thinking it made sense, the officer quickly took out a medicine from his right pocket, unable to understand the English on it, and asked, showing it to Chase Chin, "This one?" "Yes, 2 pills." Chase Chin's face was already pale. The officer hurriedly took out 2 pills and fed them to him with some mineral water. A few minutes later, Chase Chin's complexion gradually improved, saying, "I'm okay now, thank you." The officer finally relaxed, reassured that he wasn't trying to escape, and continued driving. Soon, the car stopped on a secluded road near the mountains on the outskirts of the county. There were no other vehicles or pedestrians, only 4 police cars parked with a team of armed police officers standing outside. Big June drove closer to the police cars, rolled down the window, and asked Captain Lin outside, "Captain Lin, which way?" Captain Lin pointed forward, towards the road leading up the mountain. "Got it." Big June drove on. The other officers also got into their cars, following behind. Chase Chin was baffled. "What are you doing?" "Stop talking." The 2 officers had no interest in chatting with him, focused on planning what was to come. Eventually, the 5 cars stopped at the road leading to the mountain. Captain Lin and the other officers got out first. He waved to everyone, "Stay sharp, take out your guns. This will be a test." Everyone gripped their guns tightly, as if facing a great enemy. The 3 people in the modern car remained inside. Chase Chin, looking at the formation outside, started to feel uneasy. He had already been caught, so why were all these people with guns standing guard outside? After 5 minutes, Captain Lin received a phone call, then knocked on the window, saying, "They're almost here. Start getting ready." The officer beside him bit his teeth, seemingly nervous, took out the key to unlock Chase Chin's handcuffs, and returned the tools he carried for committing crimes back to his pocket, telling him, "Get out of the car and walk forward." Chase Chin was utterly confused. "What? You're letting me go?" Captain Lin outside said, "Yes, we're letting you go. Get out and walk." Chase Chin, puzzled and under the threat and urging of a bunch of police officers, had no choice but to get out of the car and walk forward as instructed. But he was very scared. With a bunch of people holding guns behind him, could it be that his crime was so severe that they were worried about the social impact and wanted to stage his refusal to be arrested and escape, resulting in being shot by the police in this remote and desolate place? Chase Chin suddenly felt utterly disheartened, all his plans and preparations gone in an instant. He stood still, holding back the tears of despair in his eyes. "What are you doing? Keep walking." Captain Lin urged from behind. "All right then, having calculated everything, he missed one thing." "Well, let them shoot him then." "Sorry, Jasmine gone." He smirked, his gaze lazy, his steps weary as he continued forward. "Don't dawdle, run." Captain Lin shouted again. Chase Chin had no choice but to pick up his pace and run. "Everyone, follow up, wait for my command." Captain Lin shouted to the officers. More than a dozen police officers followed Chase Chin, maintaining a distance of more than 10 meters, keeping pace with him. After running for a while, there was still no sign of them attempting to shoot him. Chase Chin, puzzled, looked back. They were earnestly maintaining the same distance. "Don't stop, keep going. You can slow down if you're tired," Captain Lin instructed again. Chase Chin had no choice but to lower his head and keep running. Then, Captain Lin received a phone call, hung up, and told everyone, keep an eye on the back. If a car comes, we'll get on. The group continued jogging for a few more minutes, Chase-Chin gasping for breath, the physically fitter criminal police officers always urging him not to stop. Suddenly, someone shouted, Captain Lin, they're here. Captain Lin immediately yelled, stop, if you run we'll shoot. Chase-Chin thought to himself that they were indeed going to shoot him. Having been tormented before his death was truly unlucky. He had no choice but to stop. Immediately, more than a dozen police officers rushed forward, 4 or 5 of them pinning Chase-Chin face down on the ground. Big June excitedly exclaimed, caught him, finally caught him. As if rehearsed, 5 police cars stopped beside them, and out came Greg Wong, George Zhu, leaders from the county bureau, city bureau, and provincial office, along with their staff. The group re-handcuffed Chase-Chin, pulled him up, and Captain Lin formally asked loudly, are you Chase-Chin? Chase-Chin helplessly said, didn't we just meet? Captain Lin ignored him, took out a photo he carried, seriously compared it, then turned to the leaders, reporting to the leaders, the criminal Chase-Chin has been captured. George Zhu nodded in approval, well done. Greg Wong coughed, saying, take him back to the bureau for interrogation first. We also need to find out who the accomplice is. Chase-Chin was immediately taken into a car, escorted by several vehicles to the county bureau. George Zhu asked, how did you catch Chase-Chin so quickly? Captain Lin explained, after posting the wanted notice yesterday, Director Wong arranged for us to patrol the city and arrest the criminal. Our criminal police team's 2 plainclothes officers spotted a suspicious man this morning, suspecting it might be Chase-Chin in disguise. They continued to follow him while notifying the main force. Chase-Chin might have noticed someone was following him, so he fled here, planning to escape into the mountains. Once he ran into the mountains, it would be very difficult to capture him, so we made a quick decision, immediately encircled him, and indeed it was Chase-Chin. George Zhu nodded in affirmation. You did very well this time. Your 2 plainclothes officers have sharp eyes. Where are they? They just went back to the bureau with the car. Good. We should commend them later. Of course, you all deserve credit. At that moment, a criminal investigation team member approached, reporting, leaders, we just received news that Zhang Hongba was killed by Chase-Chin this morning. What? George Zhu's expression changed. What happened? Wasn't a special police force arranged to protect Zhang Hongba around the clock? The man explained, the plainclothes were indeed following and protecting Zhang Hongba around the clock, but Chase-Chin entered his company early in the morning before Zhang Hongba arrived at work, posing as a court official waiting in the reception room, and then killed Zhang Hongba. The criminal entered the company before Zhang Hongba arrived, and the plainclothes were following Zhang Hongba himself, so we were outmaneuvered by the criminal. George Zhu sighed deeply, pursed his lips, and looked at the other leaders, saying, it seems the criminal is indeed extremely cruel, still daring to kill after the citywide wanted notice, and his crime methods are very sophisticated. We can't blame our case officers. After all, everyone is very dedicated. Now that we've caught the criminal, it's a great achievement. Let's go back and thoroughly interrogate him. Everyone nodded in agreement. The case was a collective effort, and with Zhang Hongba's death, if it were to be scrutinized, it would be embarrassing for everyone. So, no one paid further attention to Zhang Hongba's fate, and they hurried to interrogate and solve the case. After Chase-Chin was captured, the police immediately began the interrogation. In the interrogation room, Greg Wong sat in the middle, with Jack Lin and a recorder beside him. This case was too big, causing a lot of trouble, and Greg Wong was still furious with the criminal, remembering the several times he was mocked as the impressive Director Wong. He had to personally interrogate him. He carefully examined Chase-Chin, whose appearance looked older and unattractive, but was indeed a very common face, making it difficult to draw attention when committing crimes. Yet, beneath such an ordinary face, hid an extremely cruel heart. He had killed entire families in his first 3 crimes, and even after the citywide wanted notice, he risked killing another person. This person can no longer be described as crazy, he's simply abnormal. Especially seeing his now seemingly smiling expression, Greg Wong was even more infuriated. He frowned in disgust and said, Chase-Chin, we had a hard time finding you. A smile appeared on Chase-Chin's face. The plot you guys had just now was quite unique. It took me a while to snap back to reality. Greg Wong coughed, avoiding the topic, and said, we'll ask about other things later. Right now, we just need you to confess one thing. Who is your accomplice? Accomplice. Chase-Chin looked very surprised. What accomplice? Don't play dumb. We have solid evidence. You had an accomplice in this case. Chase-Chin shook his head. I think you must be mistaken. It was just me from start to finish. Where would I find an accomplice daring enough to commit such a big case? Jacqueline cursed. Don't fucking pretend. Do you know where you are? Do you want to suffer? Chase-Chin asked seriously. Are you suggesting you'll use torture to extract a confession? Jacqueline looked at Greg Wong, unsure of how to respond. It's rare for a criminal to directly question them like this. Greg Wong said, we definitely have ways to make you confess. It's better if you cooperate voluntarily. Do you mean torture? Chase-Chin continued to ask earnestly. Greg Wong paused, then directly answered him. You're damn smart. You got it right. Chase-Chin smiled. Do you plan to take me to court for trial, or just let me die abnormally in prison? Jacqueline said, don't worry, no one has died in our prison yet. But if you don't cooperate, we'll make you wish you were dead. Chase-Chin seemed very confident, shaking his head. You wouldn't dare. Jacqueline stood up and walked towards him. You think I wouldn't dare? Greg Wong did not stop him. Their most important task now was to confirm the identity of the other accomplice, and they needed to do it quickly, as the accomplice might have already fled. Chase-Chin asked, have you found my residence? Jacqueline stopped in his tracks and said, of course we have. Well, then have you searched my house for physical evidence? Nonsense. It seems you haven't finished your work of searching for physical evidence. It's just noon now, and you found my residence only a few hours ago. If you don't want me to die in jail, I suggest you don't use extraordinary methods on me, because I'm a patient. Greg Wong slightly frowned. What illness? Jacqueline sneered. Mental illness, perhaps. Chase-Chin said, there are 2 medical records in my house. You will find out sooner or later. One is from a doctor in the United States, and the other is a diagnostic report from the Provincial Cancer Hospital. I have a brain tumor in the mid to late stage, and I can live for about half a year to a year. However, if internal bleeding occurs during this period, I could die at any time. Chase-Chin sneered, as if he was talking about someone else's illness. Jacqueline and Greg Wong exchanged glances. Greg Wong wiped his forehead. Listening to him speak, it didn't seem like he was lying. If he was lying, it wouldn't be long before they found out, as they could take him to the hospital for a checkup. But if what he said was true, then they really couldn't touch him. After all, for such a big case, leaders at all levels were waiting for the results. This person was definitely going to be taken to court, and the result would certainly be the death penalty. But if he died abnormally in prison before the trial, that would be a big problem. Greg Wong had no choice but to say, we will verify what you said. If you were lying, don't blame me for being rude. Chase-Chin smiled at him. Greg Wong, holding back his anger, continued to ask, tell me, who is your accomplice? I really don't have an accomplice. Impossible. Greg Wong slammed the table and angrily said, if you don't have an accomplice, how was Jiang Xiaobing's body transported out of Anil Road? There are surveillance cameras at both ends of Anil Road. We have checked, and you entered and left empty-handed. Where is Jiang Xiaobing's body? Chase-Chin smiled. So that's what you're talking about. After I killed him, I didn't drive, so I obviously couldn't carry the body out of Anil Road, right? Moreover, if I had directly carried Jiang Xiaobing's body out at that time, you would have suspected through the surveillance that Jiang Xiaobing was already dead. Then how could the subsequent kidnapping case continue? Where is Jiang Xiaobing's body then? Director Wong, do you still remember the surrounding environment of Anil Road? Nonsense. One side is a river, and the other side is houses. There's no other road connecting to the outside. What about behind the houses? Behind the houses? Greg Wong asked Jacqueline. What's behind? Jacqueline recalled and said, there seems to be a public green space. Chase-Chin said, that's right. It used to be a small park, but later half of it was demolished, and various debris and garbage were piled up there. Usually, not many people would go there. After I killed Jiang Xiaobing, I propped up the body and climbed the stairs of the nearby residential building to the middle of the first and second floors and threw Jiang Xiaobing from the window of the staircase to the back. After leaving Anil Road, I circled back to that green space, drove away Jiang Xiaobing. Greg Wong was gaping, pondering over Chase-Chin's answer. How could the crime process be like this? Through analyzing the surveillance, he had thought over and over again, convinced that the murderer must have driven Jiang Xiaobing away. How could it be directly thrown from the stairwell to the back of the house? He gritted his teeth and asked, how did you think of throwing Jiang Xiaobing from the stairwell to the back of the house? Chase-Chin started to laugh. Actually, killing someone is not easy. I need to consider details everywhere to avoid being caught by you. First of all, naturally, I have to avoid being captured by the surveillance cameras. Secondly, before committing the crime, I had to scout the area thoroughly to increase the final success rate. Take dealing with Jiang Xiaobing as an example. Before killing him, I followed him for many days, scouting all the possible routes he could take home, and formulated different disposal plans. Anil Road is one of the routes Jiang Xiaobing takes home, so I naturally had to fully understand the surrounding environment and decide on the follow-up work based on the terrain. If Jiang Xiaobing had not taken Anil Road that night but another route, I naturally had other methods to transport the body without being captured by the surveillance. Jacqueline said, "Then why did you always refer to yourself as we on the phone?" Chase-Chen looked at Jacqueline with a somewhat disdainful gaze, seemingly doubting his intelligence. Jiang Xiaobing is dead, and I only have one pre-recorded message from him, so I could only let him speak once. I had to refer to ourselves as we, claiming I was a middleman, to make you believe Jiang Xiaobing was not by my side. Otherwise, every time you wanted to speak with the hostage, and I didn't satisfy you once, wouldn't you have seen through it? Greg Wong stared into Chase-Chen's eyes, trying to see if he was fabricating lies, but the other party's expression was very calm. He couldn't conclude and had to continue asking, "You said you wanted to avoid surveillance. Why then did you stand under a surveillance camera and give the middle finger? Were you provoking the police?" Provoking? Perhaps. I did consider that aspect, thinking you would never find me. But besides that, I had a bigger purpose. At that time, I was wearing a mask, so you couldn't see my face. I thought about what information you could get from the surveillance, and after much thought, the only information you could get was my height and build. So at that time, I wore a pair of shoes with hidden heels. I don't know if this little trick brought some obstacles to your investigation. Greg Wong let out a heavy sigh. The purpose of Chase-Chen showing up under the surveillance was indeed to mislead them with his height, which was only understood later when a witness said the suspect was only about 165 centimeters tall. This pair of height-increasing shoes indeed played a big role in Chase-Chen's crime, causing them to waste a lot of effort. He pondered for a moment, but now he still needed to clarify the issue of Chase-Chen's accomplice and continued the interrogation. "The time you killed Li Gang's wife and son, was the bottle containing hydrogen cyanide made by you?" Of course, the principle of the device is very simple. Although I studied chemistry, I still have some manual skills, and it didn't require any knowledge of circuits. The remote control was from a ready-made remote-controlled car. We checked the surveillance, and you left the residential area before Li Qiming came home. So, who operated the remote control later? It was still me. Greg Wong snorted coldly. "Could you still control the remote control from outside the residential area?" "Of course not. I was hiding behind a tree nearby waiting." "Weren't you already gone from the residential area?" "Leaving doesn't mean I can't come back." Chase-Chen smiled. "They don't control pedestrians and electric bikes in their residential area. After I left, I rode an electric bike back in, so you didn't notice me." Greg Wong stared at him, pondering for a long while, and asked, "Why did you leave and then return?"